Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're taking on a big one. It's your relationship with knowledge itself. We're
Mhm.
cracking open the cult of experts, and
Oh, this is a juicy one.
it is, it really gets you think. Have you ever felt like maybe you rely too much on experts, or like it's just really hard to like trust your own judgment
Oh, yeah.
these days? Well, you're not alone.
Yeah, this article, it really kind of throws out this provocative idea right at the beginning. It almost feels like it's saying that like modern society has just like totally hit the reset button on this whole concept of objective truth.
Whoa, whoa, okay, hold on, rewind that for a sec. What does that even mean? Are they saying there's no such thing as truth anymore?
Well, no, it's
Ow.
a little more nuanced than that, I
Yeah.
think. What they're suggesting is that instead of trying to like reach for this like capital T truth, we've kind of shifted into this system where whoever shouts the loudest, whoever's got like the most experts backing them up, they get to decide what's considered true.
Okay, so it's kind of like truth by popular vote. Like, what?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like we're crowdsourcing truth now, and
Is that a good thing?
well, that's what the article really wants us to think about.
Yeah.
And they make this comparison to political democracy, which I think is really interesting. If you think about it, would we want to elect a heart surgeon based on like who gives the most rousing speeches?
Right. Mm-hmm.
No, probably not. We want someone who actually knows what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But then we turn on the news or, scroll through social media, and it's all about which expert has the best sound bites or the most followers online.
It's true. It's like the loudest voice in the room wins. But is that really how we should be evaluating knowledge? I mean, should it even be a popularity contest?
It's a huge question, right? And it gets at what the article is really trying to critique.
Yeah.
This whole idea that by like democratizing knowledge, this like reliance on expert consensus, sometimes it might be leading us further away from like real understanding.
Okay, so how do we, like, break free from that? If we can't just always rely on experts, how do we even start to figure out what is true in this, like, crazy information saturated world?
That's the question, isn't it? And this is where I think the article gets even more interesting. It suggests that even though we might say we value things like freedom of belief,
Mm-hmm.
faith often gets pushed to the sidelines, like religious faith in particular,
Mm-hmm.
especially in like public discourse. It's almost like we prioritize secularism, expert opinions, all that stuff.
That makes sense. I
Yeah,
mean, you don't exactly hear a lot of appeals to faith in like a political debate or a scientific discussion, but how does that impact how we understand truth?
that's a great question. There's this one line in the article that really kind of stuck with me. It basically says that both communist and capitalist societies, because they both kind of push faith aside, they actually end up in the same place, a rejection of any kind of objective truth.
Wow, okay, that's a pretty bold statement.
Yeah.
But like what does that actually look like in our day-to-day lives? I mean, how does that tension between faith and the secularism, how does that actually play out when we're like bombarded with all these expert opinions on everything, from climate change to like what the best diet is?
That's what we have to unpack.
Right.
And this leads to another point. The article makes this idea that we put too much stock in the word expert. It's not saying that every expert is wrong or trying to mislead us.
Right, of course not. But let's be real, it's not like experts haven't gotten things wrong before.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. They're human.
Mm.
They have their own biases,
Yeah.
They make mistakes, and sometimes they don't even follow their own advice.
Ugh, you know what that makes me think of? All those times you see some public figure, someone who's considered an expert, get caught doing something that totally contradicts everything they're supposed to stand for.
Exactly.
It happens all the time.
It makes you wonder, if these experts can't even live up to their own standards, why should anyone else?
Exactly.
Right.
And it makes you question their motives, too. It's
Yeah.
like, do you actually believe what you're saying, or are you just in it for something else?
And that's the danger, right?
Yeah.
You start to lose trust, not just in the person, but in the expertise itself. And what?
Okay, so we can't just blindly accept what experts say, but we can't just like write them off completely either. So where does that leave us? What are we supposed to do with all this information, all these different opinions?
Well, that's where things get really interesting.
So where does that leave us? It feels like we're being pulled in all these different directions.
Right. It's like this tug of war between trusting experts, but also like not just accepting everything they say blindly.
Exactly. So how do we find that balance? How do we know when to trust and when to question?
Well, it seems like the article is suggesting that the answer isn't about blindly following or rejecting experts,
Yeah.
but about something way more empowering.
What do you mean?
It's about reclaiming your own ability to reason, to think critically, even when you're faced with like all these expert opinions.
So instead of just taking someone's word for it because they have a bunch of fancy degrees after their name, we should be asking questions, digging deeper, and ultimately forming our own conclusions.
Exactly. You've got it.
Mhm.
And the article makes this super important point. It actually says this, and I'm quoting here. The intelligence or expertise of an expert is meaningless when pursuing truth, as those things need not necessarily have any bearing on the truth.
So basically, someone being called an expert doesn't automatically make them right.
Yeah, their expertise isn't the same as truth. It's more about recognizing that truth. The kind of the capital T that the article talks about often means we have to look beyond those labels and titles. It's about engaging with the information ourselves, using our own brains and reasoning skills.
Okay, but isn't that kind of a lot of pressure? It's like we're being asked to be our own experts in a way.
I see what you mean. It is both exciting and kind of terrifying at the same time.
Totally.
It's like on one hand, we have this incredible power to think for ourselves, but then on the other hand, it comes with a lot of responsibility.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I don't want to just blindly follow the crowd, but I also don't want to be so skeptical of everything that I end up like dismissing valuable knowledge.
You've got to find that sweet spot. It's that balance between just accepting everything you hear and being completely skeptical of everyone and everything.
Easier said than done, though, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the article gets that. It even talks about embracing this tension. It's like holding this space between what we can see and what we can't, the spiritual and the material.
So it's almost like we have to hold these two kind of opposite ideas in our minds at the same time. We have to acknowledge that there are things we know and things we don't know, things we can explain, and things that might be beyond our understanding.
That's a really good way to put it. And it gets at the heart of what the article's saying about individual reasoning. It's not about rejecting all expertise outright, but about developing your own ability to evaluate what they're saying.
Okay, so how do we actually do that? Like, practically speaking, if I'm being bombarded with information constantly, how do I become more discerning, more of a critical thinker?
That is the million-dollar question. And unfortunately, there's no easy answer or like one-size-fits-all solution. But the article does offer some good starting points.
Okay, like what?
Well, it stresses how important it is to seek out different perspectives. Like instead of just surrounding yourself with people who already agree with you, actively look for information and opinions that challenge your assumptions.
So basically break out of the echo chamber.
Exactly. It's about being willing to engage with a wide range of ideas and perspectives, and maybe especially if they make you a little uncomfortable at first.
Which honestly is tough because it's so much easier to just stick with what you already know and who already agrees with you.
It is.
Yeah.
It's human nature to gravitate towards that kind of comfort and familiarity. But the article makes the point that it's often in those moments of discomfort when our beliefs are challenged that we actually grow and learn the most.
It's like that saying, the truth will set you free, but first it'll probably make you uncomfortable.
Exactly. And that discomfort, it shouldn't scare us away. It's a sign that we're on the right track, that we're actually doing the work of critical thinking.
I love that. So for someone listening right now who's maybe feeling a little overwhelmed and like, okay, I'm ready to be more discerning, but where do I even begin?
Right.
What's like one practical thing they can start doing today?
One really simple but powerful technique is to just start asking questions about the information you come across. Like whenever you read or hear something new, just take a second and ask yourself, who's saying this? What are their biases? Is there any evidence to back this up? And are there other points of view I should be considering?
So we need to become like our own personal fact checkers.
Exactly. Constantly evaluating the information you're taking in and forming your own conclusions based on the evidence.
And not being afraid to be wrong sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, being willing to change your mind when you're presented with new information.
Yeah.
That's actually a hallmark of a true critical thinker.
It takes humility for sure.
It does.
But it's also incredibly freeing to know that you're not stuck with whatever you used to believe.
That
you can learn and evolve.
100%.
Yeah.
And that openness to new ideas, that willingness to truly engage with different perspectives, that's what the pursuit of truth is really all about.
So it's not about having all the answers.
Right.
It's about being brave enough to ask the tough questions, even if it means like really challenging your own deeply held beliefs.
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
And that actually brings us to another super interesting point in the article. It talks about the importance of being okay with uncertainty.
Uncertainty. Wait, but haven't we been talking about finding truth? How can we be certain and uncertain at the same time?
That's where things get really interesting.
So how can we be talking about uncertainty when we've been spending this whole time talking about finding truth? It feels kind of contradictory.
That's a good point. It does seem kind of paradoxical, right? But what the article's getting at is that it's actually in those moments of uncertainty when like our preconceived ideas are challenged and our perspectives are kind of blown open,
Yeah.
that's when we're most open to like actually discovering something new, something true.
So it's not about being 100% certain about everything. It's about being okay with not knowing all the answers.
Exactly. Embracing the unknown. Because the truth is, there are limits to what we know right now.
That makes me think about all those big scientific discoveries throughout history. A lot of them happened because scientists were willing to say, you know what? We don't have all the answers. And that's what allowed them to discover like totally groundbreaking stuff.
Right. It's a perfect example. It's about approaching knowledge with humility and curiosity,
Yeah.
not with this like arrogance where we think we have it all figured out.
So instead of trying to make everything fit into how we already see the world, we should be open to like changing our minds, discovering new ways of looking at things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that means being willing to really engage with different points of view, even the ones that feel strange or like completely go against everything we thought we knew.
It's about getting comfortable with that discomfort, like holding those opposing ideas in your mind at the same time and really like wrestling with them.
Yes. And in that wrestling, in that struggle to make sense of those different perspectives, that's often where we find that our own understanding like deepens and grows.
So it's not about saying one side is totally right and the other is totally wrong. It's about finding those little bits of truth that might be hidden in the middle.
Exactly. Truth is usually way more complex than we want it to be. It rarely fits into those neat little boxes we try to put it in.
This has been such a thought-provoking conversation. Honestly, I feel like we've only scratched the surface of this article.
Me too. There's so much more to unpack there.
Definitely. But I think we've given everyone listening a lot to think about today. So to wrap things up, what's one big takeaway you hope our listeners walk away with?
If I had to choose just one, it would be this. Never be afraid to question, to challenge, to really think for yourself. Finding truth isn't about reaching some finish line. It's a journey. And the best journeys are the ones we take with an open mind and a healthy dose of skepticism.
Love that. And to everyone listening, we hope you'll keep diving deeper into these ideas. What really resonated with you today? What challenged your thinking? And most importantly, what will you do differently based on what we've talked about? Until next time, happy diving.